Welcome, everyone. I am really excited to have a conversation today in Capital Connection with Sean McBrearty. Sean is the coordinator for Oil and Water Don't Mix, a coalition of organizations that have been uh, deep in the Line 5 fight for many years now. And he is also the policy director at Clean Water Action, one of the state's largest and most influential environmental advocacy groups. Sean, thank you so much for taking some of your day to be with us today and tell us these great stories about fighting the good fight.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me, Conan. I appreciate the time to talk about this issue that's been a critical issue for the last 7 years, at least in Michigan.
So when I joined the Michigan Environmental Council in 2019, that was my first interaction with Oil and Water Don't Mix. I knew, of course, about the pipeline under the Straits and the organizing that needed to happen there, the opportunity to have a dramatic protection action for the lakes themselves and have a climate change impact from shutting down a pipeline. It was high drama time when I joined because it was the transition between the Snyder administration and the Whitmer administration, and the legislature had approved a tunnel for a new pipeline through the Straits, and the environmental community was pulling out all the stops to block that move and to finally shut down the tunnel. I worked with Sean for about a year, and then I was just so impressed with how Oil and Water Don't Mix had structured its organizing. One of the best things, Sean, that I hope you get to tell us a little bit about is how much good spirit there is around that table. I never went to an Oil and Water Don't Mix meeting where somebody wasn't laughing. Like it was really cool. Like the culture there is great. And so I invited Sean to come on this webinar for two reasons. One, of course, we want to talk about the Line 5 fight, but to me, more importantly, the kind of organizing work that Oil and Water Don't Mix is doing. Like this is the outside game that makes the inside game that organizations like MEC and LCV and NWF play so effective. Like without that strong presence in the citizenry around issues, our voices sound hollow in the Capitol. And they did such a fantastic job. I was in the city of Detroit seeing yard signs. I was in my neighborhood seeing yard signs, and they ran all the way up to the Strait and across the bridge. Every corner of this state had some kind of citizen activism going on around Line 5, and it really made the day. It was fantastic work that you all did. So Sean, I do want to get some time to talk about how you did that. When I first invited you, that was my real purpose. Let's talk about the structure of coalitions. And then like 2 weeks later, the governor said she's going to shut down Line 5.
Yeah.
Like we thought that was going to be possible. We were in the fight. And then all of a sudden it is really hot and rolling, which is super exciting. So I know people are going to want to hear a little bit about that as well. And in fact, why don't we start there? Like, what's the status right now?
Yeah, thank you. So the current status with the action that the governor took back was the second Friday the 13th in 2020. If you'll remember, the first Friday the 13th was the day that we were like shutting down, going into quarantine back in March. And this Friday the 13th was a little bit less bleak than that one, with Governor Whitmer finally announcing that she was going to decommission Line 5 by revoking the 1953 easement. So in 1953, I know a lot of folks on this are familiar, but just to back up for people, in 1953, the state gave Enbridge's predecessor, Lakehead Pipeline, an easement to allow Line 5 to operate in the Straits of Mackinac. And because it's operating across public trust waters that the state is supposed to protect, the state has the right to revoke that easement if it's been violated. And we knew that the easement has been violated, and they found when Governor Whitmer about 15 months ago ordered the DNR to review the easement for violations, we knew they would find tons of them because we've already found tons of violations. And so when Governor Whitmer announced that she was ordering DNR to revoke the easement and then going into court to immediately seek compliance with Enbridge, I mean, that was the best case scenario. And that's what, this broad citizen movement across the state has been asking for the last 7 years. Obviously, I'm sure we'll get to it a little bit. We still have to fight the tunnel plan. This is not over yet, and Enbridge is still trying to get things in line to dig an oil tunnel through the Straits of Mackinac, which, when we get there, it is as stupid as an idea as it sounds. Digging an oil tunnel against or right through one of the most critical ecosystems, not just in the state, but in the world. Really, there's not another place like the Straits of Mackinac.
Can you tell us a little bit about Oil and Water Don't Mix itself? What is this coalition? Who sits there? How did you all get together?
Yeah, so Oil and Water Don't Mix, and I wasn't involved at the very beginning, but I'll sort of tell the story that I've heard from those who were there. So first of all, after the 2010 Kalamazoo oil spill, people really started to wake up and look at oil infrastructure around the state, and that's when Line 5 really started coming to the surface. And it was the great work of Beth Wallace at National Wildlife Federation with that first Vice News documentary on Line 5, that there was this ticking time bomb sitting at the bottom of the Straits of Mackinac. And Oil and Water Don't Mix started with some local groups of people up in northern Michigan who were interested, environmental groups, citizen groups who were interested in working to shut down this pipeline. So it started out very organically. And then the first event was a rally up at the Straits with Bill McKibben coming in and talking about Line 5. And I think it was Bill Lotka, who's still one of the most integral parts of Oil and Water Don't Mix, does all of our digital work and lots of other things for us. But Bill, came up with the slogan "Oil and Water Don't Mix" for the banner to hang behind Bill McKibben while he was speaking, and the name kind of stuck. And so the coalition really grew from there, and from the grassroots, from the people who would be first affected by an oil spill up in the Straits of Mackinac, the people who live there. And so Oil and Water Don't Mix, today is comprised of several nonprofits from around Michigan, as well as Native American tribes. All 12 of the federally recognized Native American tribes of Michigan have signed on with Oil and Water Don't Mix. Mike Ripley, the Natural Resources Director for the Chippewa-Ottawa Resource Authority, sits on our steering committee, and the tribes are another just really I can't overstress the importance of the tribes to this coalition, because without their leadership and their unity on this, I'm sure we would not be where we are today. They really helped to raise the issue, especially during the dark days of the Snyder administration, where frankly, we were getting no communication from the governor's office and the attorney general's office, and they at least had an obligation to pay lip service to the tribes. So at least we were hearing something, and the tribes were pushing very forcefully through all of that. And then we also have business supporters, and there's hundreds of businesses who have signed on. If you go to Mackinac Island still today, you can see the Oil and Water Don't Mix shut down Line 5 signs in some of the storefronts of businesses all across our state, and a lot of them that would be very horribly affected by an oil spill. So really bringing together that coalition of not just the environmental community, the environmental nonprofit world, but that coalition of the nonprofit world, the tribes, businesses, and then of course, the hundreds of thousands of supporters that we've had across Michigan who have taken some sort of an action on Line 5. And so, with such a single focus, but a major focus to shut down this pipeline, I mean, you think about the audacity of that, of how high people were aiming at the beginning, when you had a small group of nobodies coming together and saying we're going to take on one of the biggest oil companies in the world and the Snyder administration and win. But they set an ambitious goal, and today we're very close to finally reaching that goal. And the coalition has grown since then, and I'm glad to be able to coordinate Oil and Water Don't Mix. It really is. You mentioned earlier the spirit of the group and everything, and it really is. It's wonderful. The amount of trust that's been built between the people and organizations involved over the last 7 years is truly, it's something great. It's wonderful to work with people, even through COVID, where we've had to go to all digital meetings. You're right. Every meeting starts out with laughter of some sort. And I don't know, frankly, that we would have made it this long and that we would have gotten as much done as we have if we weren't able to laugh about it, because you need that, spirit to keep fighting. And we kept fighting, and now we're very, very close to victory.
I want to delve in a little bit on the importance of the citizen action work. In the Capitol, there's enormous pressure to craft public policy by virtue of compromise. The differences between the players are so stark. The interests are so varied. We often seek that middle ground, and that's a completely legitimate process for public policy making. On issues like this, the pressure is even higher, right? Because the stakes are higher. And I think my observation is one of the only reasons that we're able to get that audacious victory that you talk about is because somebody had that vision and was unrelenting in holding on to it. Can you talk a little bit about how if you all experienced pressure internally around when the tunnel was presented as an option, for example, and how you grappled with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, there's definitely through the years been instances where we have differences of opinion with different organizations and different individuals. And one of the great things about this coalition is that we've worked together. We've really put in the work to build trust to the point where when we do have those disagreements, we understand that nobody's trying to tank the project in some way, and we're able to talk out these disagreements and come to a conclusion, which we internally debated. We've internally debated several different things around Line 5, different strategies, different policy ideas, but I've really credit to so many of the people who started this with Bill Laka and Kate Madigan and Jim Lively and David Holtz, who was the coordinator before me and is our comms coordinator now, does great work. And I think a part that's been critical to that as well. So it's been building trust, being able to have the open resources that we do and the open conversations. And then it's also being able to follow the lead of the people and the tribes would be primarily affected by a Line 5 spill, and to make sure that we're not really stepping over those folks and the goals, and really considering the goals that they have in mind for how this should play out. One of just to share a story sort of about the grassroots, part of the grassroots side of this. One of the groups in our steering committee, Straits Area Concerned Citizens for Peace, Justice, and the Environment, which is a small group of folks that all live up at the Straits, and every one of them would show up to everything. It was so great, and so I mean, if we wanted to have a rally somewhere, whether it was welcoming cars going to the Mackinac Policy Conference, or parades in Traverse City where we thought we needed to have a presence or something, every person in Straits Area Concerned Citizens would show up right when we needed them, rain, shine, whatever, and they'd be there from the very beginning. And they're not the only organization who did that, obviously. So many have, but having people who are willing to work like that at any given time on anything has really helped us to be able to build trust to get through some of those disagreements, and also to build momentum and keep going.
When we're engaging the citizenry in environmental advocacy, keeping attention on something for 7 years is difficult. Our attention spans as a society on political issues is typically short. Oil and Water Don't Mix has been very creative in its engagement strategies. Can you talk a little bit about some of the grassroots organizing tactics that you guys took on?
Oh yeah, we've had a lot of fun grassroots tactics over the years. It takes such a wide variety of strategies. And the other great thing about the group that we have is that all the groups in our steering committee and other groups working on Line 5 are really good at playing to their strengths. So with clean water, for instance, we have a dynamite field canvas when we're not in quarantine, we've been able to deploy the field canvas. One example of that recently, around the UP Energy Task Force, we sent our field canvas up into the UP to gather comments to the task force, and that was a pretty successful project, with a lot of people writing in saying they wanted other sources of energy than continuing to rely on a 67-year-old pipeline. We've had a lot of rallies at the Capitol and elsewhere that have had big effect. A couple years ago, another grassroots action that we did, one of the more fun events I think I've ever done, was when we did a rally on Mackinac Island, and we we had tried, different groups involved had tried to do events on Mackinac Island before, and they'd always, stop you at the boat with signs and say that you can't bring the signs on because they'll scare the horses. So fine, instead of signs, we just all wore black t-shirts with big white letters that said, "Shut down Line 5, no tunnel," or "No Line 5 oil tunnel." And we did like a silent march through policy conference up to the hotel where they asked us to leave, and we went back down through Mackinac and had a good time, and had like a selfie contest with who could get the best selfies with lawmakers and other people who were there for policy conference with your Oil and Water Don't Mix shirt.
I remember David Holtz. I was my second week on the job, and David had shot me a note. He was like, "I need you to cut me a check for $500 for t-shirts." And I was like, "What? What is that?" I didn't even know what Oil and Water was at that point.
Mm-hmm.
That, and then just seeing the pictures of that action on the island that year, it was really great. You guys,
yeah, and another thing that we had done in the past, unfortunately, one of the stars of the show had passed on here, but we had a protest horse. We got media coverage a couple times in Lansing with Clifford the horse, who was from Drummond Island, and we'd come down and do rallies. And one of them, actually, Clifford walked into the governor's building. Couldn't get him past security, but he walked into the governor's building right before Christmas with Santa Claus to deliver coal and a bunch of letters asking for the shutdown of Line 5 to Governor Snyder. Got a nice headline in the Detroit Free Press the next day. But yeah, we've had a lot of the grassroots tactics have been wonderful. And then and that's been backed up by having some really solid groups on policy and legal issues who also play their role in the coalition. Without the folks at Flow and Michigan Environmental Council and a lot of the other groups that have been engaged, they've put in some serious work as well in helping us drill down on the policy options and make sure that we're getting where we need to be on the legal front as well.
I really appreciate that. Van Jones has this framework for social change that does talk about the importance of the head and the heart spaces, right? And we need people who have the inside game expertise for sure. And I hope we do a webinar on this, but we don't win in Michigan if we aren't touching the hearts, which is what Oil and Water has really been very successful at, motivating people right here. Sean, we got a bunch of questions that are popping up, so I want to
cool.
I want to hand those off to you if you don't mind. What advice or suggestions do you have for students and passionate advocates who want to help oil and water don't mix?
Well, thank you very much. You can start by going to oilandwaterdon'tmix.org. We have a lot of ways to get involved. You can sign up there to volunteer. And thanks, David, for throwing our stats in the chat here. So folks, no, we've had over 32,985 people have taken action through Oil and Water Don't Mix. We've had more as well through the individual organizations that serve with Oil and Water Don't Mix. We've had 2,231 people who have volunteered and 1,633 individual donors. Some of the best ways to get involved right now are you can make comments to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, who have an open comment period right now on the tunnel. Really staying informed, because this is also an issue that changes pretty frequently. There's always updates to Line 5, which is, I think, part of what's helped it stay in the media as long as it has. The 2018 anchor strike, was another. We were wondering how much longer we're going to be able to keep people's attention, and then the anchor strike happened. And then throughout 2020, it's been change after change after change with the governor and attorney general. So sign up at oilandwaterdon'tmix.org, and that's a great way to get involved. You can volunteer for things on there. Get on our email list, and we try not to bombard people with emails, but we do have a lot of things, and we'll send you emails about what you can do from there. And if you have, we've had groups of students specifically who have sort of organized their own rallies and done several events, and then given public comment, helped out with us on different things over the years. So there's definitely a lot of ways for you to get involved on that.
There are some technical questions. Line 5 crosses back into Canada under the St. Clair River. An oil pipeline break there would be as bad or worse than under the Straits. Why don't we talk about that crossing?
The crossing, I'm sorry, it cut out for just a second.
At St. Clair, Sarnia.
The St. Clair Sarnia crossing is the state does not have authority under a public trust easement there. So while you're right, that is an important crossing, it's not something where we have the state authority for action. And so a little bit more difficult. PHMSA, Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, in their entire existence has never shut down a pipeline before a catastrophic failure. So, we knew that acting on the problems in the Straits, which there are so many problems with the pipeline in the Straits, from the curvature of the pipeline, there's new bends in it from it not being properly supported. They've had sections where I think the longest stretch was over 286 feet of unsupported pipeline on the bottom. They changed the support structures that they were supposed to use. Like 1953, they were using sandbags essentially to support the pipeline. Then they started doing these screw anchors, which basically turned it, it would be as if you took a railroad track and turned it into a monorail without changing the engineering design and without ever doing an engineering study. They've had all of these problems with the pipeline in the Straits. And then there's, of course, the large incurable problem of the due care clause to the ordinance, which says they have to take the due care of a reasonably prudent person in dealing with, protecting the public trust waters with the pipeline there. And Enbridge has failed on that front many times. In fact, Judge Jamo in Ingham County Circuit Court has already ruled that they have, he's already ruled that they've been in violation of the due care clause. So we knew that going after in the Straits of Mackinac was not only the most dangerous part of the pipeline and the part that we have to really watch out for, but where the state could act.
That's a really, really clear explanation of that. I hadn't heard it put that way before, Sean. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
This isn't, of course, the only water issue that that we're facing. There are myriad threats to the Great Lakes. Water withdrawal and extraction is one of them. There's a question about whether oil and water might ever address water extraction, for example, in Everett. Do you see a pivot coming?
Well, so I know that the Nestle permit and water extraction is definitely a very important issue. And, I know that several of the organizations involved with Oil and Water Don't Mix also work on that issue. As far as a pivot for the coalition and for the campaign, that's not a conversation that we've really had yet. We want to, make sure we win this fight. I do hope that after Line 5 is finally shut down and the tunnel plan is laid to bed, I do hope we'll be able to keep this campaign together and keep working on other critical issues. Just because it's such a good group to work with, and there's I haven't really been a part of another coalition that's grown this close and easy to work with. So that's I think the water extraction at Everett is a major issue, but it's just not a conversation we've had yet among the steering committee.
I'm curious if you have a favorite lesson learned from building this coalition and generating this action around the Line 5 pipeline that is applicable potentially to other challenges that the environmental community faces. Anything that you'd say, we did this and it was incredible from Oil and Water, and we should do this every time?
Well, there's I think there's a couple things, and one of them is making sure that we're following the lead and really following the lead, supporting and being in touch with those who would be primarily affected. And in our case, that was the people living up in northern Michigan and up in the Straits, and the Native American tribes who have fought with us every step of the way. Making sure that we're listening and following their lead is critical. And the other thing is trust and transparency, which go hand in hand. Really, having the difficult conversations necessary to build trust and transparency, I think, is a critical piece of that.
Sean, thank you so much for taking time, and thank you and all the Oil and Water Don't Mix coalition members and allies. I know a lot of you are on this cheering Sean on today. Thank you for the hard work you've done and the incredible impact that you have enabled for all of us. It's been beautiful to watch.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. And Barb, I see your question there. If you go to oilandwaterdon'tmix.org, I believe they're still on there. If not, if you live in East Lansing, I do have a couple here in Lansing. So you can email me, and I'll throw my email in the chat real quick here before we end, if that's okay, Conan.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do a follow-up to these. So you'll get an email from MEC, and we can make sure, Sean, that we provide that information in the follow-up email as well.
Cool. Thank you guys very much for having me, and thanks everybody for joining today.
Yeah, everybody, thanks for taking some of your afternoon, even morning with us. So really appreciate it. Hope to see you at another one of these. Sean, keep up the good work.
Yeah, thanks, Conan.